Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tag1 Team Talks. Today we're talking about documentation as code and linting pros. This is part two. We talk about what the tools are, the tools that are out there, what their strengths and weaknesses are, why you might use one tool versus another, and get into what tests are, how you write them, what kind of tests you can write. Please check out part one, which is a broader overview of linting and introducing documentation into a process that's similar to development and automation. And coming up next in part three is going to be a demo where you can see all of this in action. I'm Michael Myers. I am the managing director at Tag1 Consulting. I'll be your host today, and I am joined by Lynette Miles, who is the principal technical writer at Tag1. Lynette, thank you so much for joining us. This is such a cool idea and service. Can you tell me more, like, what kind of linters are out there? Give us a broad sense of sort of the ecosystem.
Okay, so like I said in the first part one, is that, like when I started, I had no idea what a linter was. Turns out that lo and behold, a lot of the document programs today, they have at least what I would consider a basic linter. So you're using like Google Docs, Microsoft Word, whatever word processing program where it does things like, hey, maybe you missed a period. Where's your comma? This isn't capitalized. That's a linter. It's checking those things for you and saying, hey, that's probably not right. Did you want to take another look at this? You can add words to your dictionary. You can tell it, stop looking at this thing. So you have, just even starting out with those basic word programs, you've got it. And then there's, I don't quite want to say more formal, but there's tools. So there's the Hemingway, I think it's HemingwayApp.com. It's a Hemingway editor. And that is a real basic, like, it's a web-based tool. So you like type your document in or your whatever, and it will I think Hemingway does things like, it will say, this is how complex your writing is. This is kind of your grade level. And it'll catch some things like, this is too long, because there's readability things like a sentence over 25 words is too long a lot of the time. And then it will do things like, those kinds of minor things. Then you get into heavier tools like Grammarly, which do those same kinds of things, but get more intense, like checking really into the structure of your sentence and how complex each sentence is. And then you start getting into like the real, what people really call linters. Like there's some of the ones I counted. There's Alex.js, which I liked, but was not customizable and not complex enough for what I have needed in the past. What was another one? I'm trying to remember all the tools now. And the other big one that I ran into was, I haven't personally used, but sounds awesome. One of the other writers I encountered at the Write the Docs conference in 2019 was Acrolinks. And Acrolinks is very customizable. And so like, we'll talk about style guides. It's very customizable. So you can give it like, here's our general company style guide, but like this piece is going to be, use the marketing style, and this piece is the technical style. So you can kind of define those voices. Because when you're writing, say, documentation, and you're explaining to a person, here's how you're going to accomplish this task, you use an imperative voice. Do this, go to this page, click this link, download this software, click this to run the installer. You use that kind of a voice. When you're doing like marketing, you're kind of more friendly, maybe like a little more, folksy and interactive, right? Hey, so we got this new thing and it's going to do these things for you. So the style is a little different, and most of the time. I mean, so
is there a BS detector for marketing content?
So I don't know about an Acrolinks, but so Veil is the tool that I have used, and that's my personal favorite one. It is not as easy to do those multiple voices, but it does in fact have a test for buzzwords and for cliches.
That's great. Like I benefit so much from, just the basic things that are in Google Docs, right? I change tense and it highlights, oh, you forgot this. But I'm so guilty of things like run-on sentences. So I'm really excited about the more powerful aspects of these tools. And this is all powered by style guides and tests. Is that how it works?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at my previous job, our documentation was based on the Microsoft Manual of Style. So when we first started using veil tests, there wasn't a Microsoft manual. So we started creating one, and as we got into it, somebody else actually committed it. So we were able to like basically take the rules for a lot of things, like you don't press a button, you click a button. When you refer to a key, you refer to it like this, those kinds of things. And we were able to like straight up codify the word press. Are you sure that's the right word? Double check that, because if you're pressing is not right, clicking is right.
And especially when you're writing documentation or how-tos, having rigid, consistent language is critical. From the formatting
Yes.
of functions to the language that you use. So there are existing style guides out there that you can just plug in. You can say, hey, I want to use the Google style guide. I want to use the Microsoft style guide. And that sort of forms the base of what you do.
Mm-hmm. Well, we started off with some basic, because there's a handful of styles that Veil just like came with. And then we not only like later somebody committed the Microsoft one, so we took that, and then we had our own sets based on things that we needed as that company. So like things like here's this list of product names. These product names would have to be, they're always labeled like this. So like at Tag1, we have the product's Tag1 Quo. It's always referred to by its full name. We would not use just one. We would not use just Quo. That's not right. That's not the name of the product. So I write a test to say, hey, make sure that this is the full name, not just this word. So that way, if that flags, so that it can be double checked to make sure we're not doing it wrong. So if that way, if somebody did do it and tried to commit it, we could say, hey, nope, don't do that.
So
and make sure that it's right. So we're always referring to the things correctly.
You use the word commit. They committed the Microsoft style guide. Do you mean like literally in the sense of like I committed it to GitHub, or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it's literally in the styles section of the Veil GitHub repo.
So I mean, tell me, we're going to do the demo and you're going to show how this works in the next segment, but I got to know, like, Veil, it's like an application that you run on your desktop, or is it something that you run in the cloud on a server? Like, how does this work?
I'm running it locally
Mm-hmm.
it's like I use Homebrew, like brew and style Veil, done. And then I went in and I set it up to like look at Markdown, because at Tag1 we're using Markdown for a lot of the content. So I always look at the Markdown files, and then I started creating, I pulled in the regular tests, the basic tests, like prose lint, job lint, right, good, there's a couple of others. And then I started adding a few things that I knew I wanted to watch out for based on Tag1 products and just flat out industry jargon that we already know and use. Like Drupal, nobody has that as a word in their dictionary unless they're part of the Drupal community. So when you see the word Drupal, please don't flag that as a misspelled word.
You mentioned that there's a detector for buzzwords. You can create detectors for your own things, like how you name products. What are some of the popular or really important things that are out there that you use or that people should know about?
The obvious ones are things like passive voice, because that's so easy to do. And it's just so pervasive. You just don't even recognize that you're doing it. And when you're writing a blog post, no big deal. When you're writing technical documentation, it's really not so good.
It occurs to me that not everybody may know what a passive voice is.
A passive voice was walked into by a bar? No, a bar was walked into by the passive voice. That's what it was. A bar was walked into by the passive voice. Yeah. As opposed to the passive voice walked into a bar.
So it detects that you're using these things. What else in addition to the passive voice and sort of the product stuff, the buzzwords?
There's so many different things. So one of the big ones that I ended up implementing later on was like, I inherited a doc set, and this particular doc set was written with he/she. So, you know, so-and-so, it's such and such thing was going to happen, and then he or she could do this thing. Why? Just they. So it would flag he or she, changes this to they, make it, you know, gender neutral, make it singular they. It's cleaner, it's easier to read. It is, you know, stuff like, and the big one that's been going around lately, like whitelist and blacklist. People are changing from the whitelist, blacklist to allow list and blacklist. You could very quickly write, and I'm sure somebody probably is, I haven't looked, but I'm sure somebody has written a look for this kind of thing. That's this kind of, you know, because, or, you know, the master branch or master slave databases, those kinds of things where we want to be, you know, maybe not using that terminology anymore. Those kinds of things are actually really easy and straightforward to catch, and make those little changes that are more inclusive and make your documentation and your writing, you know, in general, just more approachable.
That's great. And it enforces things that, you know, you often don't necessarily actively think about. You know, you see, I might forget to do something. This makes sure that you do it. Are these just things that are included in Veil? Do you find them online and download them elsewhere? Is it both?
Mostly the people tend to be the people who are using it actively, they tend to be pretty open about committing it back to the, you know, when it's not like too specific to the company. So like GitLab, for instance, they're using Veil. They have it actually in their repository. You can see what their rules are. They're not committing those things back to the original repository because it's too specific to their company, but I couldn't remember how to format a spelling test. But I knew there was they had a spelling test in there. So I went and took the format to write it for one of the tests that I needed to do.
So these,
and I knew they had it, and I knew it was right because Amy did it.
These tests are largely open source. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Is Veil itself, is the underlying program, is that open source too?
Wow,
that's amazing. So the whole system is open source.
Yeah.
Who created Veil? Is that a Git thing, or?
There's a guy named Joseph Cotto. He's JD Cotto on GitHub, and he owns the repository. He wrote a really nice long post introducing it back in, I want to say, July of 2018. We first encountered it in February or March of 2019 and just adopted it and went nuts. So it's got it's not a huge community, but it is a fairly vibrant and active group of users.
But before we jump into the demo, what is this stuff? Like, I want to write a test. I want to have a style guide. You know, is this some sort of structured markup thing? Like
YAML.
Like,
YAML files. Yep. Yep.
I like it less.
I was like, I don't know anything about you. I've seen, like, you know, composers great. I know nothing about how that works. Cool. I'm going to copy and paste stuff and then modify it. And I do. That's what I do, because I'm like, this is not my area of expertise. I have a guy for when I need code, you know?
And he's a
That
fantastic
Earl guy.
world class, to say the least. Very cool. So
He comes in handy.
it YAML files, structured text with all of these great examples out there, so that you can create your own tests based on other things. So you can get up and running really quickly with this, with some really sophisticated and powerful checks.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what we did. Is we took those basic checks, added them in, and then we were like, okay, now we need to apply our styles on top of that. And now we already had a written style guide. We had like this 30-page, here is how you do these kinds of things. There was a lot of overlap with the Microsoft Manual of Style, which is this enormous, well, when it was still a printed book, was like this 400 something, I think, page style guide of here's how you refer to everything in the Microsoft software universe. Or actually Microsoft hardware and software, because it talked about all their different hardware products too. So, you know, we had that, and then so we took that and then we made our own separate style set, and then we wrote the specific tests that we needed that applied only to us as part of that as well. And it was actually, it was really easy because we had all of those great examples.
I can't wait to see this in action, and that's coming up next in our next segment, folks. If you haven't seen part 1, which is just a general broad overview of what this is and how it works, check that out. The demo is coming up next. All the links that Lynette just mentioned are going to be in the show notes, so check them out. If you liked this talk, please remember to upvote, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Please check out past Tag Team Talks at tag1.com/tagteamtalks. Send your feedback to tagteamtalks@tag1.com. We'd love input on what you like, don't like, and topics that you want to hear us cover in the future. A huge thank you to everyone who tuned in today. And Lynette, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back.